At first glance, you might think that Techters are mere supports, but I want you to take that mindset out of your head, wrap it in plastic, step on it, and throw it outside the window because boy oh boy, this underrated class might be the difference between a normal clear or a speedrun. Let's go! Techters are basically the Mage Knights of New Genesis and are defined by their trademark skill, Shifta the Band. This buff basically dials up the damage output to 11 since everyone gets the boost with 24/7 uptime. It increases the party's potency by 5%, increases it further by 5 when hitting down bosses, increases both physical and elemental down factors, decreases damage taken, and speeds up natural PP recovery speed almost like a Force sub. It's like Techter decided that it wanted to have every class's trademark passive. This class is nuts! Speaking of Shifta, let's talk skills. Ideally, you'd want to take most of it with the exception of Ward Bad Condition and Reverse Bounty. We don't really need that for now, but I know someday we will, and by then, we'll get more skill points. Let's talk about the other skills and why they're very important. Wand Lovers is pretty much straightforward. I'ma just show you a clip to demonstrate how ridiculous this skill is. Yeah, pretty dope. Wand Parry Counter also closes the gap but is limited horizontally, kinda like the Knuckles parry. It does deal a lot of damage though, so parrying is very rewarding, especially from a class that has a slight problem with innate DPS. Wand Element Change is one of the class highlights as this allows Techters to be very versatile no matter what opponent they are facing. In the subject of elemental downs, its contributions are similar to normal techniques. When we did the research, it seems that there are two separate meters, physical and elemental downs, which brings me to the proposition of taking Bardablot and Zondic Clad. Now we might think that it's a useless skill since our wands and talises do not contribute to Blot and Clad, but it does pack utility, especially in the coming weeks with a UQ instance filled with 7 Bravers, oh I don't know. In exchange for a measly 3% faster PB charge, I'll make the argument that having more utility is always better. Zondic Clad, for example, does have decent DPS instead of just spamming Wave Crash, and Barta can literally freeze Bujin out. What are you going to do with those ice stacks? Make the most out of it with Blot. But if you really want 3% faster PB charge, that's absolutely fine too. Tricky Capacitor is a nice filler skill and restores some decent PP, almost equivalent to 2 to 3 normal attacks. Also has some good damage, similar to Ranger Spread Shot. Now on to Photon Art, starting with wands. Swift Smash and Wave Crash are basically your two options. Smash is great for closing the gap with comparable damage to Wave Crash, but the latter deals more DPS, and can be cancelled halfway through the animation. Costs more PP though. For Talises, the difference between Convergence and Spread Shot is basically the function. They both contribute to elemental downs, they cast minor elemental effects such as freezing Gororon's belly, but they are mainly used for DPS. Although they're not as high as Wand or basically almost every other weapon, they excel when hitting with elemental weakness. It's third to the last when compared to other weapons in terms of one-hit DPS, just above Ward Lands and Rifle. Spread Shot, however, is a great mobbing tool and only costs 10 PP, so if you're into maintaining DPS, Talis is great. Weapon Action also adds 2 PP per hit, so don't forget to always have it up to further extend your DPS output. This also has a guard frame during initial cast. Techniques add depth to the Techter, as this makes you more versatile. You can basically fill in every role as a Techter, but your core will always be providing a boost to your team. We won't go into detail on how techniques work, because we're saving that for Force, but simply put, it packs a lot of utility, and paired with Bartablot or Zondic Clad, they can dish out some good burst damage. Not really comparable to the output of fighters and hunters, but the mere utility of status effects and elemental downs make techniques highly relevant in urgent quests and veteran hunts. With that being said, is it possible for Techters to deal more damage? Short answer is absolutely, and we've got subclasses and multi-weapons to thank for that. Now a lot of players may see Force as a first option for sub, and that's a nice choice, but since Techters are a well-rounded class, adding fighter or hunter sub would actually increase your damage output, hence making Techters almost on par to said DPS classes. Why? Shifta, baby. When a boss is down, you basically have 10% more potency. This negates the main class weapon damage bonus of 10%. So if you main fighter or hunter before, you can literally just use the same rotations that you got comfortable with and still appreciate the damage output. With the right augments like melee technique, you can even out the damage of subclasses with their hard-hitting PAs. Circling Buzzard, for example, ranks second in terms of highest DPS out of all the melee PAs. So if you multi-weapon a dagger, you'll dish out more damage even with the subclass penalties compared to just spamming Wave Crash. Hunters, we've got Catellia to thank for. Grab a sword and whip out Caliber Streak. The possibilities are wide. To sum it all up, Techters have the following perks. They possess elemental damage and access to techniques that contribute to elemental downs. a strong buff that enhances the whole party and basically adds 80% potency tops, and the current wand lineups are meta, like Straga, Catilia, Resurger, and Troida, which makes subclasses and multi-weapons far more relevant compared to other classes. But before we close this video, have you noticed that we did not mention Gliesen? It's because this is strange enough for a separate discussion. We ran tests using drop attacks with a +10 Gliesen, Straga, and Troida wand and had very strange results. We only have two theories for this. There's a certain trigger that bugs out wand elemental change, or it's a latency issue, which is highly unlikely but will include that possibility nonetheless. After running multiple tests, we found out that wands automatically maximizes the damage output even if you're not switching to the proper element. Troida is supposed to crit for 148 instead of 171, Gliesen at 171 instead of 188. These damage outputs are only possible with a 15% multiplier from one elemental change. When we did the actual testing, we found out that even with the wrong element, all three weapons got the maximum damage. We'll dismiss this as a bug that's convenient for wands, but a bug nonetheless. Finally, Photon Blasts. So, Taluses have a faster animation in exchange for damage, while wands deal a truckload of damage in exchange for time. Both are great, but I'd still prefer wands' raw damage, especially during boss downs. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope this guide encourages you to try out the Techter. If you found value in this guide, please do consider subscribing to get notified about future videos. Drop a like too, it really helps the channel's algorithm. Thanks to everyone that voted for this guide. We really love to hear from you guys. And as always, peace, be nice, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.